What's up, guys? Welcome back. Since pharmacy school interviews are about to start in about 3 to 4 months, I thought it'd be a good idea to make a video just detailing some useful tips when it comes to pharmacy school interviews. The standard pharmacy school interview usually runs like this. It's divided into 3 portions. So when you go there, you're there usually with a group of other candidates who are also interviewing for that school, and it's divided into an interview portion and a essay portion where you have to write an essay. They give you a topic on the spot, and usually you're given about 45 minutes to an hour to finish that essay. And the third portion, depending on the school, is you get a chance to mingle with some of the current students and some of the current faculty, and you can ask questions and they can give you a tour of the school. So the 3 most important interview questions that you're almost guaranteed to be asked at every pharmacy school interview is: 1, tell me about yourself. 2, why do you want to go to this school? So make sure you do some research on the school before you go into the actual interview. Make sure you know why this school stands out over the next school and exactly why you want to go to that particular school. And a third interview question you're going to be guaranteed to be asked by the interviewer is: why do you want to be a pharmacist? Besides for these 3 interview questions that you should definitely have memorized in your brain, you should know back and forth, you should know like the back of your hand, you should also just get a book or an online website that details the most commonly asked pharmacy interview questions and just write them out before the actual interview and just make sure to have them memorized so you know what's going on, so it takes the stress out of interview day so you won't be caught off guard. The last thing you want to do when you go into interview day is to fumble a simple question like, tell me about yourself. Another bit of advice when it comes to interview day is make sure you keep up with the current events in pharmacy. For example, when I had my pharmacy school interview, what was happening at the time was that this company, led by Martin Shkreli, he raised the cost of Daraprim to over 5,000% overnight, and that was a huge controversy. And I remember at this specific interview, it was a group interview, I had a panel of interviewers in front of me, and next to me were 2 other candidates, and they asked us, what do you think about this event that is occurring at the time? So just make sure you follow up with current events, make sure you kind of know what you're talking about so you don't just stumble over these easy current event questions. Interviewers like to see that you are prepared to go into pharmacy. You're not just doing it just because. You want to have a little bit of background knowledge with you, and keeping up with current events is one of the main ways they can see your passion about the pharmacy profession. And going back to interviews, I know that a lot of pharmacy schools are now switching to the MMI Interview Format, which is the multiple mini interview format. It's where you have many different rooms you have to go to, and each room has a different scenario, and the school likes to see that you're able to think on the spot. For example, for one of the multiple mini interview format schools that I went to, I would walk in and they would have a problem right in front of me for me to solve, and I just had to think on the spot. I just had to think how to solve it. So I recommend going online and buying a book that tells you kind of how to prepare for the multiple mini interview formats and just run through a couple scenarios in your head before the actual interview itself so you're more prepared when it comes to interview day. So the next tip that I have is the attire. Now typically when it comes to fashion, girls have a lot more options than guys. But when it comes to business professional attire, girls' attire is actually pretty straightforward. For a girl, you just have to get a sharp suit, make sure there's no wrinkles, or you can get a nice blouse and a nice jacket that goes with it, and just make sure your hair is either straight or tied up in a bun, and just make sure it's kept very neat. And another thing for girls is just try to keep the cleavage to a minimum. It's a professional event, it's not a club. You want to try to look as professional as possible. Now for the guys, obviously you need to get a suit. Make sure the jacket and the pants match. And here comes the finer points for guys' attire. Make sure your shoe color matches your belt color. So if your belt is black, make sure your shoe is also black. If your belt is brown, make sure your shoes are the same shade of brown. For guys, make sure you wear long socks that go at least up to your calves. You want it to be so that when you sit down and your pants rise up, you don't show any skin on the legs or any leg skin. Is that even a thing? But just make sure you wear long socks for guys. And another thing for guys is the tie bar. A lot of guys don't wear tie bars. It's not a necessity. But if you do wear a tie bar, make sure you don't wear it too low where it's at the belly button or too high where it's right next to your neck. You want it to be between the third and the fourth button. So if this first button is around your neck, around your collar, this is going to be first button, second button's here, third button's here, fourth button's here. You want the tie bar to be between the third and the fourth button. And make sure the tie bar's width does not extend past the tie. You want the width of the tie bar to be shorter than the actual tie itself. These are just the finer points when it comes to guys' business professional attire. One last piece of clothing advice for the guys is make sure the tie does not extend past the top of your belt. And another tip that I have is, if you're unfamiliar with the area, say you've never been to that city before and you're flying in, I recommend going in a day early just so you can scope out the area, just so you know how to get there, where to park if you have a car, where to find the building, where to locate everything you need, just so when it comes time for the actual interview day, you take the stress out of looking for the place. And just try to show up at least 20 to 30 minutes early. You know, the last thing you want to worry about come interview day is to show up late, have trouble looking for parking, and you just really don't want that. You know, we're all trying to get into pharmacy school here. You just want to take as much stress out of the process as possible, because I know the whole process is already so stressful. And the last and absolutely most important interview tip I have for you guys is, don't just be yourself. When I talk to someone and I ask them, oh, what advice do you have for the interview? And they say, just be yourself. Honestly, I might as well just have not talked to them, because that tells me nothing. You don't want to just be yourself. If possible, you want to exude the passion for pharmacy. You want to exude excitement. So when you're at home, you behave a certain way in front of your siblings or your parents, and you have about, a certain level of energy that you show. You're at home. You don't need to constantly impress people. But when you're out in an interview setting, you want to impress people. You want to show how excited you are to be there. You want to ask questions. You want to try to talk to everybody that you can. Just show who you are. And this segues into the next part of the tip, which is literally everybody that day is watching you. Every single student, every single faculty. So a lot of pharmacy schools don't want you to know this, but I know this because I've been through this process, is that when you're talking to certain students, they have the opportunity to go to a professor and say, hey, I like that guy, or I like that girl, and I want them to come to pharmacy school with us. So when you're talking to everybody, don't think, oh, just because they're a student or just because they're a faculty that's not interviewing you, they're not important. Literally every single person you talk to that day is important. So make sure you're on your best behavior. Make sure you respect every single person you talk to. And when you talk to them, try to seem genuinely excited to be there. Ask genuine questions. And just like for the interview itself, make sure you have questions ready to ask the students, ask the professors. Have these questions memorized so you know the day of, you don't have to start fumbling for questions. Again, I just want to emphasize, every single person you meet that day at the interview, every student, every faculty, has the opportunity to decide whether or not you belong at that school. So just make sure you're on your best behavior. That's a little secret. You're only going to hear it from me. For example, when it was my interview day at USC, they had this section where you had the opportunity to talk to some of the students. And I was talking to this one girl. She was very nice, and we were just talking, just making small talk. And about half an hour later, when it came time for my interview, she was sitting in the interview room with me, and she was the one that was actually interviewing me. So again, every single person you meet that day, make sure you treat them with respect. They have the opportunity and the ability to say whether or not they want you in their program. Last thing I want to end with is, once you get to the interview stage, honestly, you're pretty much there. The chances of you getting into that school is so high once you can get to the interview stage. Just keep working hard. You guys are going to do great. Trust me.